Sick of getting blisters? Stop slipping and just be comfortable with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Great fit, great comfort, lots of grip, and an even better price. Available now at puregripsocks.com.
I don't think any football boot was more ahead of its time than these right here. And they're not from Nike, they're not from Adidas, they're not even from Puma. They're from a brand that once upon a time were leaders in the industry when it came to football boot technology in Lotto. Let's open up what is a very cool presentation box where you can see when you pull the lid up, you actually get kind of a description of what these boots are all about, as well as a string bag featuring the exact same description, a little bit redundant, but cool nonetheless. And then finally, the boots themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the Lotto Zero Gravity, this being the limited edition Origins color, which is a modern remake of the classic Zero Gravity that came out back in 2006. This being the world's first laceless football boots, which all the way back in 2006 had a retail price of $300, making them also the most expensive boots at the time, also part of the reason why they weren't necessarily the most popular. However, now in 2023, celebrating 50 years of Lotto, you can pick these up in limited quantities, just 900 pairs worldwide for $280 a pop. Quite possibly the only time that the remake costs less than the original. And if you are by chance interested in a pair, get them before they're gone via the first link down below. Now, for those that don't know the history, it was not Adidas in 2016 with the Ace 16 Plus Pure Control to create the world's first laceless boot. That wasn't even Adidas's own first laceless boot. The world's first came in 2006 in the form of the Zero Gravity, Zero with an H, the brand of course being Lotto, which at the time was making not only the lightest boots in the world, but some of the most technologically advanced ones as well, with the Zero Gravity kind of being the pinnacle of pushing the boundaries of what was possible with modern football boot technology. And maybe this black and white colorway isn't doing the best job of kind of portraying how modern this football boot still looks, so I actually have an OG pair from 2006 in the launch white and gold colorway, which again, to think that this came out in 2006, making them 17 years old, is pretty unbelievable, because I don't know if you're with me on this opinion, but these do not look like football boots that are 17 years old. The shape, the silhouette, everything about the design still looks super sleek and modern. Now, of course, as with many modern remakes, the remake isn't exactly the same as the original. I think Lotto with the upper did a really good job of maintaining very similar synthetic materials, as well as utilizing a rubber that's very similar to the OG across the top of the foot, as well as on the back of the heel. However, you will notice the heel counter is a little bit different, and that's because the sole plate is also different. Instead of the OG one, which had the bladed studs with 2 rounded studs in the forefoot and 2 rounded studs in the heel that were actually removable plastic, but you could replace them with metal, what you're going to find on the remake is basically just the modern tooling from the Lotto brand that ultimately doesn't feel that different from the original. However, one thing that is super notable, and perhaps part of the reason why the remake is less expensive than the OG, is that the originals were made in Italy. These, unfortunately, are made in China. And that's not to say that the quality is bad on the remake, but it's certainly not quite to the same standard as the original. With the design of the Zero Gravity upper being so drastically different from modern laceless football boots that you can get today, what you're going to find is this thin synthetic material kind of wrapping the midfoot area of the boot. Everything that you see that has this kind of multicolor, sparkly, iridescent finish is this thin synthetic that actually still holds up really well. I think what Lotto was definitely known for a long time was, of course, their kangaroo leather football boots, but the synthetics they were using at this time were also fantastic and also remarkably lightweight, very underrated, I would say. However, across the top of the foot, you can see the stitching kind of going along the forefoot and toe box area is a solid piece of rubber that also makes up the entire heel area of the boot. Why this is so different from just about any modern laceless football boot is instead of having some stretch across the top of the foot to help with getting your foot inside of the football boot, what you're going to find is that this is very much a predetermined shape, with this rubber basically existing for the sake of lockdown as well as general structure, meaning that putting these boots on is incredibly difficult. In fact, at 16 years old, I remember working at a store where we actually had these for sale, and anybody that wanted a pair never ended up buying them because they simply went to try them on, struggled so hard to put them on their feet that they basically decided they were not the boots for them. It also was not uncommon to rip your socks from pulling so hard trying to get your foot inside of the boot. With that said, once you did get these on your feet, if you were able to get them on, the fit is actually pretty impressive, and I would say as good, if not better, than some of the much more modern laceless football boots that have been on the market for quite some time. What I will say about this laceless system, unlike all the knitted uppers and even some of the synthetic ones that we've had over the years, you don't necessarily get that stretch from this rubber material. It's very much a predetermined shape. So unlike a knitted laceless boot, where you kind of stretch the opening, slide your foot in, and then the upper kind of retightens around your foot, this is such a predetermined shape where unless your foot perfectly matches what Lotto have set up here, you're going to have some issues with lockdown and definitely some issues with discomfort. For the very few that did have a pair of Lotto Zero Gravities back in the day, blisters, particularly in the heel because of the complete lack of padding in the liner, was definitely not uncommon. And while I don't think that these are as uncomfortable as you could have had from a pair of football boots back in 2006, they definitely wouldn't have topped the list when it came to quality of fit and comfort, although I will applaud Lotto for making this remake fit very similar to that of the OG, and that the shaping and volume, while maybe a little bit wider with a little bit more volume, is pretty true to the original. There was one point of adjustability, however, and that came in the form of the insole, which I'll remove for you right here, and you'll notice that it's a pretty straightforward insole, kind of similar to what you would have gotten on the original pair, soft lining on the surface. It's made from a single layer of this black foam, nothing special, but inside the box, they also include this little pouch right here, which you also would have got with the OGs. Open it up and you'll find that it contains what is labeled as a double fit insole, which is actually a dense, kind of harder orange foam that's relatively thin, but the idea behind this is that you would slide these in the boots and then set the regular insoles on top in the event that you needed to reduce a little bit of extra volume inside of the football boot to make them fit that little bit more snug. This was their answer to creating a laceless design, but without lacking the adjustability element. Did it solve all the fit, comfort, and lockdown issues? Definitely not, but it's really the only attempt we've ever seen at creating some level of adjustability with a laceless design, which I personally think is an amazing idea. And as for the base of the boots, like so many modern remakes, this does feature a modern sole plate and stud pattern, which is what you're gonna find on pretty much all the high-end Lotto boots. Very flexible through the forefoot with pretty much all conical studs. I think it works really well with the upper, and like I said earlier in the video, it's not too far off what you would have had from the originals. And then there's the weight, and of course, how can we not compare them to the OGs? The remakes are a 9.5, these are a size 9, so technically half a size smaller. We'll start off with the OG pair, and you can see that they weigh in at 8.15 ounces, the equivalent of 231 grams, which would have been really lightweight for the time, very similar to something like a Nike Mercurial Vapor 3. And then here is the remake, which in hand does feel quite a bit lighter, and as you can see, it is at 6.8 ounces, the equivalent of 192 grams. If we're comparing this to other boots, even though this is a limited edition remake, they're pretty much the same weight as the current Nike Mercurial Vapor 15 Elite. On feet, I think the important thing to remember with these is that it is a 17-year-old design, and it also is the first of its concept. And considering those things, I'm actually impressed with a lot of elements of the Zero Gravity, particularly this remake, that I think they did a really nice job of staying true to the OG when it comes to the overall shaping and fit of the football boots. They also chose not to improve it in any way, so all of the same discomfort, particularly through the heel, is definitely still present on the remake, which is why I really think this is more of a collector's piece rather than a pair of boots that you probably want to wear and play in, unless you had a pair back in the day and absolutely love them, in which case I think you're going to be really happy with this remake because it does feel very true to the original. What's so interesting about the design of this boot, especially as a laceless product, is all the tension is across the top of your foot, which is typically not what we find in modern laceless boots. Usually it's the opposite, and that's simply down to the fact that it's just this solid rubber across the top of the foot. Also, this really does have a sealed effect. There is zero breathability to this football boot, which I think is also part of the reason why blisters were such a problem. Once your feet start to sweat, there is absolutely nowhere for the heat or moisture to escape. It's not really going to absorb into the rubber, so it's trapped inside, which is typically a recipe for blisters. Also, look how low it cuts on the side on both the lateral and medial side. There are parts of your foot that are exposed in these boots that would not be exposed in just about any other football boot ever made. So very unique in that regard. From a fit perspective, I think it actually has a nice shape and does wrap your foot quite well. However, there is still some heel slippage, and while it would be great to wear grip socks in a pair of laceless boots like these, because the opening is so small and there's so little stretch to the upper, it would make putting these boots on nearly impossible. So as much as you would want to wear grip socks, I'm just not sure it would work with these particular boots. From a width perspective, I think if you have really wide feet, these would also be a terrible option for you. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is maybe a smidge longer than the average boot, but not necessarily enough to where I would recommend going down half a size. Of course, with laceless boots, especially ones with as little stretch as these have, you definitely don't want to buy them with extra growing room. That's kind of asking for problems as far as lockdown is concerned. So for most people, I would definitely recommend going true to size. And I'm really sorry if that sounded like a confusing kind of all over the place explanation of how these feel, but there genuinely are not any other football boots on the planet that fit and feel quite like the Lotto Zero Gravity. So in conclusion, I love the fact that Lotto is paying tribute to what I would argue is one of the most important football boots in modern boot history. However, when it comes to a wearability standpoint, while I do think the laceless design and shaping of the boot has actually held up really well after 17 years, the wearability issues of the original remain true on the remake because they have kept the upper so similar, which means I really view this product as more of a collector's piece rather than something that you would probably want to play in.